explaining to my kid, just because he's not present here with us physically, that doesn't mean his presence isn't here with us, and he's doing these things with us, and he's, here for birthdays, and he's here for Christmas.
Kouri Richins, the Utah mom accused of murdering her husband and then writing a book about helping children grieve, now accused of something else, witness tampering. We have the letter prosecutors say she wrote in jail. Welcome back to Sidebar here on Law and Crime. I'm Angenette Levy. Prosecutors in Utah say Kouri Richins has been busy while she's been in jail, awaiting trial for the murder of her husband, Eric. They say Richins has been trying to manipulate witnesses, specifically her brother, Ronnie, by asking him to testify a certain way about her husband's alleged drug use. A lawyer for Eric Richins' family told Law and Crime earlier this year that Eric never used drugs. Eric Richins died in 2022. Prosecutors say Kouri poisoned Eric's Moscow Mule cocktail with the powerful narcotic fentanyl. Prosecutors say Eric Richins had 5 times the lethal dose of fentanyl in his system when he died, and that Kouri bought the drugs to poison him last year. Prosecutors want the judge to bar Richins from talking with her mother, Lisa Darden, and brother, Ronnie Darden, after finding the letter in which Kouri appears to tell her mom to tell her brother to testify about Eric Richins using drugs. One part of the letter reads, Eric told Ronnie he gets pain pills and fentanyl from Mexico from workers at the ranch, and not to tell me because I would get mad because I said he gets high every night and won't take care of the kids. With me to discuss this latest development in the Kouri Richins case is somebody who has prosecuted cases in the past. He is Josh Ritter. He's a former prosecutor with the LA DA's office, a host of a podcast, and also a frequent guest on Law and Crime. Josh, welcome back to Sidebar. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.
Josh, what were your first thoughts when you read this letter and you read the prosecutor's motion where they're basically saying Kouri Richins was writing letters, handwritten letters, and she had this in her cell. It was found hidden in a book. And she's holding them up on a video conferencing call so her mother can kind of read these instructions.
It's not uncommon for defendants to try to communicate with their family members or people on the outside to somehow have some influence over the game plan of their defense. And when I read first that the prosecution had made this motion for a no contact, I thought it must be something more serious. And then when you actually read the letter, you realize this is really bad. This isn't her giving some notes, giving some guidance of kind of what the overall strategy is for defense. She is trying to orchestrate her entire defense. And beyond that, it's not just telling people what type of evidence would be most helpful, what areas of testimony they could concentrate on. She's trying to get them to manufacture testimony. She's trying to get them to lie. I mean, there's no two ways of putting this. She's trying to get people to lie on her behalf because she feels that it will somehow benefit her defense. And I think that this not only will backfire upon her, it's going to be very hurtful for her at trial. I mean, this is devastating stuff as far as consciousness of guilt evidence.
The thing that's interesting to me about this as well is that she's writing all of these things trying to get her brother, Ronnie, to say that, yes, indeed, Eric used drugs. When Eric's attorneys, the attorney for Eric's sisters basically told us earlier this year, Eric had no history of drug use. He did not use drugs. We have this coupled with the fact that the prosecution says that he was fearing that she was trying to kill him, that she may be trying to poison him. So this is something he suspected in the past.
Yeah, and we're really getting a glimpse inside of her mind. I mean, we know that she's been accused of all of these really awful things, of this deliberate type of planning and manipulation. And now you really begin to see her thought process that she actually does sound like the person that the prosecution believes her to be, with this type of manipulation and the stories she wants them to tell as far as the drug use. There was this whole episode in the letter about how she wants him to talk about how he would smuggle drugs back from Mexico, but plant it on her possessions as if to blame it on her. So she had this elaborate kind of scheme that put together. It's going to be, I imagine the prosecution's going to use this greatly to their benefit.
The fact that she's holding these up on a video conferencing call. I mean, these calls, we all know, are monitored, whether it's a jail phone call or a video conferencing call. You have the ability to use these things, but they're always going to be listening, especially in a case as high profile as this, where a man lost his life, to murder, according to the prosecution. And you have a defendant. This is a big case. It's a high profile case. Of course, they're going to be reading everything she writes. They're going to be looking at everything she does as far as communication goes. And they're going to be listening to all of her jail calls. The ones that aren't privileged, you would hope that they're not listening in on her attorney with her, of course.
Yeah, and she seems to be very conscientious of that. She even talks about in the letter that she believes that the mother's phone might be tapped. So she's very conscientious of the fact that she's being watched. They believe that she may have correct. They believe that she may have written a previous letter, the letter that we're talking about, that she placed up to the glass and then destroyed that. So in one sense, she's very, like I said, cognizant of the fact that she's being watched and listened to. And in the other sense, she's incredibly sloppy. Like you said, they're not going to notice that she's placing these letters up to the glass. It's just a little too cute for law enforcement and the guards not to notice that she's trying to secretly pass messages on to her mother. Mm-hmm. It actually, too, now while we're talking about it, could get her mother into some hot water as well.
Most definitely, especially if her mother was potentially passing along these messages. I just want to read a couple of quotes from the letter. At one point, Kouri is accused of writing, "The connection has to be made with Mexico and drugs. Ronnie," this is her brother, her mom is Lisa, "Ronnie will have the messages to prove Eric confided in him about getting high." I'd like to know where these messages are coming from, because I would think that would have to mean a text message or a social media message. And then she says, "Upon information and belief, LOL." It's almost like she's kind of making fun of or kind of trying to make a joke based on how these legal filings are written. It'll say, "Upon information and belief, we believe, Kouri Richins did X, Y, and Z on this date." So she's almost making a joke of it with the LOL after that.
Yeah, I thought that was really kind of disturbing, quite honestly. She puts that, she makes these little jokes throughout the letter. And what we're talking about here is covering up her murder and getting people to lie on her behalf on the stand at her murder trial. And yet to her, it's all just kind of a joke. And throughout the letter, there's also this kind of cheerleading aspect. She keeps on telling her mother, "We're almost there. We're going to get there. We just got to fight through all this, and we're going to get through this whole thing." And you can tell the aspects of her personality that are very controlling, very narcissistic. She wants to be in charge of everything. Even behind bars, she's still trying to pull the strings on this whole thing.
It most certainly appears that way. Now, her lawyers would argue that, this was maybe a privileged communication. There was some type of envelope found in her cell that said it was going to her attorney, and that's where some of these items were found. One of the letters, apparently she's accused of writing two of these letters. One is missing, so they think she may have flushed it down the toilet. But if you're Kouri Richins' lawyer, I mean, what do you do with this? You get this motion from the prosecution basically accusing your client of trying to tamper with witnesses and trying to get your brother to lie for you at trial and testify a certain way. And now you've got to contend with this along with all of the other evidence. So if you're her defense attorney, what do you do?
There's not much you can do. It's devastating. As far as any argument that the police should not have been able to toss her cell, or that they don't have any ability to listen into her conversations, all of that's out the window. There's absolutely zero expectation of privacy for what you have inside of a jail cell or for these conversations. They warn you, in fact, before you have these conversations, that they're being recorded and monitored. So there's no argument to be made there that this was some sort of privileged conversation. I think what they do is they try to say that, "Oh, you're misinterpreting it. This is more about her highlighting for her mother what's important for their defense, so she understands the strategy behind it." But again, she goes so specifically into the things that she wants said and how she wants it said, and giving him the idea that keep it short, but here's the points that we really need to hammer home. And it becomes obvious in reading the letter that this isn't things that were true that she wants him to make sure to remember to testify to. It becomes obvious that these are things that are not true that she wants him to fabricate in his testimony.
So Kouri Richins, she's in custody, obviously. She may lose also visitation privileges. I mean, it's entirely possible that the jail decides, you know what, we're not doing this. She's not going to be allowed to have any visitation with anybody except her lawyer.
Yeah, and I actually thought the prosecution was being very reasonable in their request. They were saying, listen, at this point, we're not asking that she have no contact with anyone, but certainly with her mother and these other family members who look like they were taking part in this conspiracy. But I agree with you. If there's any further evidence that she's trying to somehow influence people and their testimony from her own jail cell, they'll shut it down completely. And you're right. I don't think they can limit her ability to speak to her lawyers. She's got constitutional rights attendant to that. But I do think that it could end up with her only being allowed to speak to her lawyer.
Is there any way you can look at this that makes it look good for Kouri Richins? Is there anything you could see as a defense attorney looking at this and saying, well, maybe this is true. Maybe maybe this evidence is sitting around out there.
I think that's the way that they're going to have to color it, is say, listen, she's not telling them to make things up. She's reminding them of things that took place that they need to remember to explain to the jury that he did have a drug problem, that he was trying to get drugs from Mexico and blame it upon me, that this was this ongoing problem that she was dealing with, and try to say that you're just viewing this in the wrong light. I don't know how far that's going to get with the judge, because that's originally where this is going to be argued in front of, because at some point she's even scripting it where she's speaking about herself in the third person. I mean, it's almost like as if she's handing the lines to people and telling them, here's the script, put it in your own words, but this is the message we need made.
Tell Ronnie not to overanalyze it. This is what she wrote in the letter. There's also another line in here I don't get. Take vague notes of all, so you remember before you walk the dog. So she's telling her mom to just, take note of all of these things, make some vague notes. Don't write anything that could get you in trouble. But then before you walk the dog, I don't know if that is some kind of code or what. But what do you make of that?
Yeah, that stood out to me too, because the beginning of the letter, in huge lettering, she has the words "walk the dog," and
yeah.
Obviously, this was a letter that was never intended for the mother to take with her. It sounds like it's going to be another letter she intends to hold up to the window and then destroy. So I don't know why. You're right, that walk the dog was emphasized in the beginning, and then the last thing that she happened to say to her was, don't forget to walk the dog side. You're right. I don't think we're being a little too paranoid to believe that might have some alternative meaning.
Yeah, she thinks the house is bugged and the phone is bugged. So maybe this was for mom to walk the dog and talk to her brother, Ronnie. Josh Ritter, we'll keep an eye on this. Thanks so much for coming on. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
That's it for this edition of Law and Crime Sidebar podcast. You can listen to and download Sidebar on Apple, Spotify, Google, and wherever else you get your podcasts. And of course, you can always watch it on Law and Crime's YouTube channel. Just remember to hit the subscribe button. I'm Angenette Levy, and we will see you next time.